The sound of that slap still echoes in my mind 3 months later. But what happened next? You won't believe how this story ends. The morning started like any other Tuesday. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the one Harold bought me for our 40th anniversary, sipping my coffee and watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. At 73, these quiet moments had become precious to me, especially since Harold passed 2 years ago. Little did I know that in less than an hour, everything I thought I knew about my family would come crashing down around me like a house of cards in a hurricane. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible family drama stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. The doorbell rang at exactly 8:17 a.m. I remember the time because I glanced at the grandfather clock in the hallway, another one of Harold's treasures, as I shuffled toward the front door in my worn slippers. Through the peephole, I saw my daughter-in-law, Rebecca, standing on my porch. But something was wrong. Her usually perfectly styled blonde hair looked disheveled, and even through the distorted glass, I could see her face was flushed with anger. "Rebecca, dear," I said as I opened the door, "what brings you here so early? Is Marcus all right?" She pushed past me without invitation, her heels clicking aggressively against the hardwood floor. Harold and I had refinished ourselves 30 years ago. The sound echoed through the house like gunshots. "We need to talk, Eleanor," she said, turning to face me with eyes that burned with a fury I'd never seen before. "Right now." I closed the door slowly, my arthritic hands trembling slightly. In the 5 years since Marcus married Rebecca, we'd had our differences. What mother-in-law and daughter-in-law don't? But she'd never spoken to me with such venom. "Of course, dear. Would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot and—" "I don't want your damn coffee," she exploded, causing me to step back in shock. "I want answers, and I want them now." My heart began to race. At my age, sudden stress wasn't something to take lightly. "Rebecca, please calm down. What's this about?" She reached into her oversized designer purse, the one that cost more than my monthly Social Security check, and pulled out a manila envelope. Her hand shook as she opened it, revealing what looked like legal documents. "This," she said, waving the papers in my face, "is what this is about." I squinted at the documents, wishing I had my reading glasses. "I'm sorry, dear, but I can't see what." "It's your will, Eleanor, your last will and testament." The blood drained from my face. "My will." How on earth did she get a copy of my will? Drop a comment below if you think you know how Rebecca got hold of Eleanor's private documents. The truth will shock you. "I don't understand," I whispered, sinking into the nearest chair. How did I get it?" Rebecca's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Let's just say, your lawyer isn't as discreet as you think he is, especially when someone's willing to pay for information." I felt sick. Mr. Patterson had been handling my legal affairs for 20 years. The thought that he might have betrayed my trust was almost as devastating as whatever Rebecca had discovered in those documents. "Now," Rebecca continued, pacing back and forth like a caged animal, "I want you to explain to me why my husband, your own son, isn't inheriting this house." My mouth went dry. The house. Of course. The beautiful Victorian home that Harold and I had bought when Marcus was just a baby. The home where we'd raised our son, celebrated birthdays and Christmases, and built a lifetime of memories. "Rebecca, please sit down. Let me explain." "Explain?" She whirled around to face me, her face twisted with rage. "Explain how you're leaving everything to some random charity while your own family gets nothing. Explain how you've betrayed your own flesh and blood. It's not like that. I said desperately. If you would just let me. It's not like what? She took a step closer, looming over my chair. It's exactly like that. This house, worth $500,000, going to the Riverside Children's Foundation, instead of to Marcus and me. The way she said, Marcus and me, made it clear this wasn't about my son's inheritance at all. This was about Rebecca's greed, her sense of entitlement to my life's work, and Harold's legacy. The Children's Foundation is very important to me. I began carefully. Harold and I always supported. I don't give a damn about your charity, Rebecca screamed, her voice echoing through the house. Do you have any idea what Marcus and I have been through? The debt we're in, the mortgage payments we're behind on. This was news to me. Marcus had always been responsible with money. Harold and I had made sure to teach him that. But looking at Rebecca's expensive clothes, her designer handbag, their luxury car, I could see through the window. I began to understand where their money troubles might be coming from. If you and Marcus are having financial difficulties, I said gently, perhaps I could help. I don't have much, but help? Rebecca's eyes flashed dangerously. The only help we need is what's rightfully ours. This house should go to Marcus. When you die, not to some worthless charity. The cruelty of her words hit me like a physical blow. She was talking about my death, as if it were nothing more than an inconvenience, standing between her and my property. Share this story if you've ever dealt with greedy family members who showed their true colors. Rebecca, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This is my home. Harold and I worked our entire lives to pay for it. I have the right to decide what happens to it after I'm gone. Rights? She laughed bitterly. What about Marcus's rights? What about his wife's rights? We've been taking care of you since Harold died, taking care of me. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Marcus called once a week, if that, and they visited maybe once a month for Sunday dinner. If that constituted taking care of me, then I was sorely mistaken about the definition. I appreciate Marcus's calls, I said diplomatically, but I've been managing just fine on my own. Have you? Rebecca's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Because from where I'm standing, you look like a lonely old woman who's lost touch with reality. The insult stung, but I straightened my shoulders. I may be old, Rebecca, but I'm certainly not out of touch with reality. I know exactly what's happening here. Do you? She moved closer, her presence intimidating in my own living room. Because I don't think you realize the position you're in. What do you mean? Rebecca smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I mean that things are going to change around here, whether you like it or not. A chill ran down my spine. I think you should leave now. Leave. She laughed again. Oh, Eleanor, I'm not going anywhere. In fact, I think it's time we had a serious conversation about your future living arrangements. My living arrangements? I stood up slowly, my legs shaky, but my resolve firm. This is my house, Rebecca. I'll live here as long as I choose to. Will you? She reached into her purse again and pulled out another set of documents. Because according to these papers from Dr. Mitchell's office, you've been experiencing some concerning symptoms lately. My blood turned to ice. Dr. Mitchell was my physician, and yes, I'd been having some issues with my memory lately. Nothing serious, just the normal forgetfulness that comes with age. But in the wrong hands, those medical records could be twisted into something sinister. How did you get my medical records? I whispered. The same way I got your will, Rebecca said. Smugly, people will do amazing things for the right price. This was illegal. I knew that much. But I also knew that Rebecca didn't care about legality. She cared about getting what she wanted. Those records are private, I said, fighting to keep my voice from shaking. You have no right. I have every right. Rebecca exploded. I'm family. And when family sees that an elderly relative is becoming incompetent, it's our responsibility to step in. Incompetent. The word hit me like a slap in the face. I am not incompetent, I said firmly. Aren't you? Rebecca opened the medical file. Let's see. Difficulty remembering appointments. Confusion about dates. Forgetting to turn off appliances. Sound familiar? Every elderly person dealt with these minor issues. It didn't make me incompetent. It made me human. If you think Eleanor is being manipulated, smash that subscribe button and let us know in the comments what you would do in her situation. Those are normal age-related concerns, I protested. Dr. Mitchell said, Dr. Mitchell can be convinced to say a lot of things. Rebecca interrupted with a cold smile. Especially when presented with the right evidence. The implication was clear. Rebecca was planning to use my medical records to have me declared mentally incompetent. If she succeeded, she could gain control of my finances, my property, my entire life. You can't do this, I whispered. Can't I? Rebecca moved even closer. Close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with something else, something that smelled like desperation and greed. Let me explain how this is going to work, Eleanor. She began to pace again, her heels clicking ominously on my hardwood floors. First, we're going to have a conversation with Marcus about your declining mental state. We're going to explain to him how concerned we are about your safety, about your ability to live alone in this big house. Marcus would never. Marcus will do what's best for his wife and his future. Rebecca cut me off. And what's best is ensuring that his inheritance isn't thrown away on some worthless charity. The Riverside Children's Foundation is not worthless, I said, anger finally beginning to override my fear. They help dozens of children every year. Children who have nowhere else to turn. I don't care if they help hundreds of children, Rebecca screamed. Those children aren't my responsibility. My family is my responsibility, and I won't let you steal from us, steal from them. I was giving away my own property, not theirs. But in Rebecca's twisted mind, she'd already laid claim to everything Harold and I had worked for. This house doesn't belong to you, Rebecca, I said, surprised by the strength in my own voice. It never has, and it never will. That's when it happened. The slap came out of nowhere. Rebecca's open palm connecting with my cheek with a sound, like a gunshot. The force of it sent me stumbling backward, my hand instinctively flying to my burning cheek. For a moment, the room was completely silent, except for the ticking of Harold's grandfather clock and the sound of my ragged breathing. Give me the keys, Rebecca said, her voice deadly calm. I stared at her in shock, my cheek throbbing with pain. What? The house keys. Give them to me, now. I will not, I said, though my voice was barely a whisper. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. You will, or things will get much worse for you. Much worse. The threat hung in the air between us like poison gas. I could see in her eyes that she meant every word. You're threatening me, I said, stating the obvious. I'm protecting my family's interests. Rebecca replied coldly. Something you seem incapable of doing. Comment below with the first word that comes to mind to describe Rebecca's behavior. We'll read your responses in our next story. I looked at this woman, this stranger, who had somehow replaced the daughter-in-law I thought I knew, and realized that I was truly alone. Marcus was hundreds of miles away at a business conference. My neighbors were elderly like me, and none of them were close enough to hear if I screamed. My closest friend, Margaret, lived across town and wouldn't think to check on me until our weekly bridge game on Friday. I won't give you my keys, I repeated, my voice growing stronger. This is my home. Rebecca smiled again, that cold, calculating expression that made my skin crawl. We'll see about that. She pulled out her phone and began dialing. Hello, Dr. Mitchell. This is Rebecca Chen, Marcus Eleanor's daughter-in-law. Yes, I'm calling about Eleanor. I'm very concerned about her mental state. No, she's becoming increasingly paranoid and aggressive. I think she may be a danger to herself. I listened in horror as Rebecca spun lie after lie, painting me as a confused, dangerous old woman who needed immediate intervention. She was good at it, convincing, emotional, concerned. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed her myself. When she finished the call, she looked at me with satisfaction. Dr. Mitchell is very concerned. He thinks you should be evaluated immediately. He knows you're lying, I said desperately. Does he? Rebecca shrugged. Or does he see a concerned family member trying to help an elderly relative who's clearly losing her grip on reality? The worst part was that I could see her plan working. Dr. Mitchell was a good man, but he was also busy, overworked, and he trusted family members to look out for each other. Rebecca's performance on the phone had been Oscar-worthy. What do you want from me? I asked, hating the defeat I heard in my own voice. I told you, I want the keys to this house, and I want you to call your lawyer and change your will. I won't do it, Rebecca sighed dramatically. Eleanor, you're making this so much harder than it needs to be. She made another phone call, this time to Marcus. I could only hear her side of the conversation, but it was enough to make my heart sink. Marcus, honey, I'm at your mother's house. No, she's physically fine, but I'm really worried about her mental state. She's been saying some very strange things. Yes, paranoid thoughts. She seems to think I'm trying to steal from her. I know, it's heartbreaking. I think she needs professional help. When she hung up, she looked at me with mock sympathy. Marcus is very concerned. He's going to cut his business trip short and come home tonight. Marcus will see through your lies, I said, though I wasn't as confident as I sounded. Marcus loved his wife, and Rebecca was very good at manipulation. Will he? Rebecca tilted her head. Let me paint you a picture of what Marcus is going to see when he gets here. He's going to see his elderly mother, alone in this big house, making wild accusations against his loving wife. He's going to see someone who's clearly confused, possibly dangerous. I'm not confused, I insisted. Aren't you? Rebecca moved to Harold's desk and picked up a framed photo of our wedding day. Tell me, Eleanor, what year did you and Harold get married? 1965. I answered immediately. And what year is it now? 2024. Are you sure about that? Rebecca's smile was predatory. Because yesterday, when I asked you the same question, you said it was 2023. I felt a chill of uncertainty. Had I said that, I couldn't remember. But then, that was exactly the point, wasn't it? Rebecca was making me doubt my own mind. You're confusing me on purpose, I said. Am I? Or are you simply having trouble keeping track of reality? Like this. Story if you've ever felt gaslit or manipulated. Eleanor needs your support. The sound of Harold's grandfather clock chiming 9 a.m. broke through the tension. 1 hour. In just 1 hour, my entire world had been turned upside down. Last chance, Eleanor. Rebecca said softly. Give me the keys. Agree to change your will, and we can work something out. Maybe a nice assisted living facility. Somewhere you'll be safe and cared for. The thought of leaving my home, of being locked away in some sterile facility, while Rebecca and Marcus sold off my life piece by piece, made me feel physically sick. No, I said firmly. I won't do it. Rebecca's mask of false concern finally slipped completely, revealing the ugly truth beneath. Fine, have it your way. She made one more phone call. this time to what sounded like a medical facility. Yes, I need to report a concern about an elderly person who may be a danger to herself. Yes, I'm her daughter-in-law. She's been making threats, acting erratically. No, I don't think she should be alone. When she finished the call, she looked at me with satisfaction. They're sending someone to do a wellness check. Should be here within the hour. I felt trapped, like a mouse in a maze with no exit. But then I remembered something Harold used to say. When you're backed into a corner, Eleanor, that's when you fight the hardest. You know what, Rebecca? I said, straightening my shoulders. You've made one very big mistake. She raised an eyebrow. Oh, and what's that? I walked to the window and pointed to the small discreet camera mounted under the eaves. Harold was paranoid about security after the break-ins 2 streets over. He had cameras installed all around the house. For the first time since she'd arrived, Rebecca looked uncertain. So everything that's happened here today, your threats, your lies, your assault on me, it's all been recorded. The color drained from Rebecca's face. You're bluffing. I walked to Harold's desk and opened the bottom drawer, pulling out a small monitor that connected to the security system. The screen showed 4 different views of my property, including a crystal-clear image of my living room. I rewound the footage and pressed play. Rebecca's voice filled the room. Give me the keys, or things will get much worse for you. Rebecca lunged for the monitor, but I was ready for her. I'd already pressed the button Harold had shown me, the one that automatically uploaded footage to a cloud storage service. Too late, I said calmly. It's already been saved. For a moment, Rebecca just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then her face twisted with rage. You think you're so clever, she hissed, but you're forgetting something important. What's that? Who do you think they're going to believe? A confused old woman with a history of paranoid thoughts, or a concerned family member trying to protect her? She had a point, and we both knew it. But I had something she didn't expect. I wasn't as helpless as she thought. You're right, I said slowly. They might not believe me, but they'll believe Margaret. Margaret? I pointed to another window, where my neighbor Margaret was standing in her garden, clearly having heard the shouting. She was already on her phone, probably calling the police. Subscribe now to see how this incredible confrontation ends. You won't believe what happens next. Rebecca followed my gaze and cursed under her breath. Margaret wasn't just my friend. She was a retired family court judge who had seen every trick in the book when it came to elder abuse. The sound of sirens in the distance made Rebecca's face go white. This isn't over, she said, backing toward the door. Yes, it is, I replied. It's very much over, but I was wrong, so very, very wrong. The police arrived first, followed quickly by the paramedics Rebecca had called. What followed was 3 hours of the most humiliating experience of my life. I was questioned, examined, and evaluated, while Rebecca played the part of the concerned daughter-in-law to perfection. If it hadn't been for Margaret, dear, wonderful Margaret, I don't know what would have happened. She'd heard enough of the confrontation to back up my story, and her reputation carried weight with the responding officers. The video footage was the clincher. Even Rebecca's skilled manipulation couldn't explain away the evidence of her threats and the slap that left a mark on my face. But Rebecca's final card was still to be played. Marcus arrived home at 8 p.m. that night, and I've never seen my son look so torn. Rebecca had spent the entire afternoon preparing for his arrival, spinning her web of lies and half-truths. Mom, he said quietly, sitting beside me on the couch. We need to talk. I could see the doubt in his eyes, the uncertainty that Rebecca had planted there. She'd done her job well. Marcus, I began, whatever Rebecca has told you, she's told me that you're having some difficulties. He interrupted gently, and that maybe it's time to think about other living arrangements. My heart broke a little more. Do you believe her? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I believe you're both under a lot of stress, and I think maybe some changes would be good for everyone. What kind of changes? Well, Rebecca has found a very nice assisted living facility, about 20 minutes from our house. You'd be close to family. You'd have medical care available, and Rebecca would get the house. I finished quietly. Marcus looked uncomfortable. Mom, this isn't about the house, but we both knew it was. It was entirely about the house, and the will, and Rebecca's greed. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. Marcus, I said, I want to show you something. I led him to Harold's desk and pulled out a folder I'd been hiding there for months. Inside were bank statements, receipts, and photographs. Evidence I'd been gathering since I first began to suspect that Rebecca wasn't who she pretended to be. Comment evidence if you want to know what Eleanor discovered about Rebecca. What is this? Marcus asked, leafing through the papers. It's proof that your wife has been stealing from me for over a year, I said quietly. The bank statements showed regular withdrawals from my account. Small amounts that I'd assumed were for household expenses when Rebecca had offered to help with my shopping and bill paying. But the receipts told a different story. While I was eating canned soup and day-old bread, Rebecca was charging luxury purchases to my account. The photographs were even more damning. I'd taken them secretly over the past few months, documenting the expensive items that kept appearing in Marcus and Rebecca's home. Items that I was apparently paying for, without knowing it. Mom! Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. There's more, I said, pulling out a private investigator's report that I'd commissioned. After my suspicions grew too strong to ignore, the report detailed Rebecca's secret credit card accounts, her gambling addiction, and her history of financial fraud that dated back to before she'd even met Marcus. My son's wife wasn't just greedy. She was a criminal who had targeted our family, specifically because of our assets. I don't understand, Marcus said, sinking into Harold's chair. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you loved her, I said gently. And I hoped I was wrong. All this time, Marcus stared at the evidence, his face cycling through emotions. Shock, betrayal, anger, and finally, a deep, bone-deep sadness. I'm sorry, son, I whispered. No, Marcus said firmly, standing up and gathering the papers. I'm the one who's sorry. I should have seen it. I should have protected you. The confrontation with Rebecca that followed was uglier than anything I'd experienced that morning. When faced with the evidence, she dropped all pretense and showed her true colors. Screaming, threatening, and eventually attacking Marcus when he told her their marriage was over. By midnight, Rebecca was in jail on charges of elder abuse, theft, and assault. The house was quiet again, but the damage had been done. Marcus stayed with me for the next week, both of us trying to process what had happened. We talked more in those 7 days than we had in years, rebuilding the relationship that Rebecca had systematically tried to destroy. Mom, he said on his last morning, about your will. I looked at him carefully. What about it? The Riverside Children's Foundation. That's where you and Dad used to volunteer, isn't it? I nodded. Harold and I had spent countless hours there, helping children who had nowhere else to turn. It had been one of the most meaningful parts of our lives together. I think Dad would be proud, Marcus said quietly. And I want you to know, I'm proud too. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. But the story doesn't end there. It couldn't end there. because life is messier and more complicated than that. 3 months after that terrible Tuesday morning, I was sitting in my favorite chair again, watching the sunrise and sipping my coffee. But this time, I wasn't alone. Marcus had moved back home, not permanently, but for long enough to help me heal and to figure out his own next steps. The divorce proceedings were ongoing, and Rebecca was facing serious criminal charges that would likely result in prison time. The house felt different now, not just because of the security upgrades Marcus had insisted on, or the new locks on all the doors. It felt different because the pretense was gone. The lies had been stripped away, leaving only truth in their wake. I decided not to change my will. The Riverside Children's Foundation would still inherit the house, just as Harold and I had planned. But Marcus would be comfortable. I'd made sure of that with other provisions that Rebecca had never known about. "You know," Marcus said one morning over breakfast, "I never thanked you." "For what?" "For being strong enough to see through her when I couldn't. For protecting not just yourself, but me too." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "That's what mothers do, son. Even when their sons are too stupid to see the truth. Especially then." We both laughed, and for the first time in years, it felt genuine. The doorbell rang at exactly 8:17 a.m., the same time Rebecca had arrived 3 months earlier. For a moment, my heart raced with memory and fear. But when I looked through the peephole, I saw Margaret standing on my porch with a warm smile and a coffee cake. "Ready for bridge practice?" she called through the door. I opened the door with a genuine smile. "Always." As Margaret bustled into the kitchen, chattering about the latest neighborhood gossip, I realized something important. Rebecca hadn't just tried to steal my house, my money, or my dignity. She'd tried to steal my sense of safety, my ability to trust, my connection to family and friends. But she'd failed. The house was still mine. My relationships were stronger than ever, and I'd learned something valuable about my own strength. Even at 73, I was still capable of fighting for what mattered. The legal proceedings took another 6 months to conclude. Rebecca was sentenced to 3 years in prison for elder abuse, theft, and fraud. The judge noted that her targeting of vulnerable elderly people was particularly heinous, and that the sentence should serve as a warning to others who might prey on seniors. Marcus used the time to rebuild his life. He started therapy to understand how he'd missed the signs of Rebecca's manipulation, and he threw himself into volunteer work at the Riverside Children's Foundation. Seeing him there, working with kids who needed advocates and protectors, reminded me so much of Harold that it brought tears to my eyes. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories of family drama and redemption. 1 year after that terrible Tuesday, I received an unexpected visitor. It was Rebecca's cellmate's daughter, a young woman named Sarah, who had tracked me down through public records. "Mrs. Chen," she said nervously, standing on the same porch where Rebecca had made her demands. "I know this is strange, but I wanted to apologize." "Apologize? For what?" "My mother was Rebecca's cellmate for 6 months before she was transferred. Rebecca talked about you constantly, about how she'd been wronged by you, how she was the victim in all of this." I invited Sarah in for coffee, curious to hear what Rebecca had been saying about our situation. At first, my mum believed her. Sarah continued. "Rebecca was very convincing, but then other things started coming out. Stories about other elderly people she'd targeted, other families she'd hurt. My mum realized that you weren't Rebecca's first victim. This was news to me. The police had investigated Rebecca's background, but they'd focused primarily on her crimes against my family. There were at least 4 other elderly people she'd scammed over the years. Sarah explained. Always the same pattern. Target someone with assets, gain their trust, or access through a family member, then systematically drain their resources. I felt sick thinking about other families going through what we'd experienced. What happened to them? One man lost his entire retirement savings. A woman had to sell her home and move in with relatives. Another couple had to declare bankruptcy. The full scope of Rebecca's criminal behavior was staggering. I wasn't just a victim. I was part of a pattern that had destroyed multiple lives. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Sarah looked down at her hands. "Because my mom wanted you to know that you were brave to fight back. Most of Rebecca's victims never reported her. They were too ashamed, too confused, or too isolated to seek help. And because," she continued, "there's something else you should know." She pulled out a letter, crumpled, and obviously read many times. "Rebecca wrote this to her cellmate about a month ago. My mom thought you should see it." With trembling hands, I unfolded the letter and began to read. That old woman ruined my life. I had it all figured out, the perfect plan to get what I deserved. But she was tougher than she looked. I underestimated her. I underestimated how much fight an old lady could have in her. I won't make that mistake again. The letter continued for 2 pages, detailing Rebecca's plans for revenge once she was released from prison. It was filled with threats against me, against Marcus, and against anyone who had testified against her. "She's not giving up," I said quietly. "No," Sarah agreed. "She's not. That's why my mom wanted you to have this, so you could be prepared." I called Marcus immediately, and within hours, we were meeting with the police detective who had handled Rebecca's case. The letter was enough to extend her sentence and to ensure that I would be notified before her eventual release. But more importantly, it reminded me that my fight with Rebecca wasn't really over. It might never be over. Share this story if you believe in standing up to bullies. No matter how old you are, 2 years have passed since that morning when Rebecca slapped me and demanded my house keys. She's still in prison and will be for at least another year. Marcus has rebuilt his life and is in a healthy relationship with a wonderful woman named Janet, who treats both of us with genuine kindness and respect. The house still creaks and settles at night. Harold's grandfather clock still chimes every hour, and I still sit in my favorite chair watching the sunrise. But I'm not the same person I was that Tuesday morning. I'm stronger now, more cautious perhaps, but also more confident in my ability to protect myself and the people I love. I've learned that being elderly doesn't mean being helpless, and that, sometimes, the most unlikely people are capable of the most extraordinary courage. The Riverside Children's Foundation is still in my will, and Marcus is still supportive of that decision. But I've also made provisions to ensure that my home will be protected from future predators, with legal safeguards that Rebecca could never have anticipated. Margaret and I still play bridge every Friday, and she still brings coffee cake. Marcus visits every Sunday, and now Janet comes too, along with her 2 children from her previous marriage. The house is alive again with laughter and conversation, the way Harold and I always intended it to be. Sometimes late at night, I think about Rebecca and wonder if she's learned anything from her experience. I wonder if she understands the damage she caused, not just to me, but to Marcus, to her other victims, and ultimately to herself. But mostly, I try not to think about her at all. She's had enough of my time and energy. Instead, I think about the future, about the children who will benefit from Harold's and my life's work, about the family relationships that have been healed and strengthened, about the lesson I've learned that it's never too late to fight for what's right. If Eleanor's story inspired you to be brave in the face of adversity, hit that like button and let us know in the comments what you would have done in her situation. The truth is, Rebecca did me a favor, though she'll never know it. She showed me that I was stronger than I thought, braver than I imagined, and more resourceful than anyone, including myself, had given me credit for. She also showed me the importance of having people in your corner, Margaret's support, Marcus's love, and even the kindness of strangers, like Sarah's mother, reminded me that we're not meant to face life's challenges alone. As I finish writing this story, the sun is setting behind Harold's favorite oak tree in our backyard, the same tree where we hung Marcus's tire swing when he was 7 years old. The same tree where Harold proposed to me 59 years ago. Rebecca wanted to take all of this away from me. She wanted to reduce my life, my marriage, my memories, to nothing more than dollar signs in her bank account. But some things can't be stolen. Love can't be stolen. Memories can't be stolen. The strength that comes from knowing you've lived a good life, that you've fought for what's right, that you've protected the people and causes that matter most, that can't be stolen either. Tomorrow is Wednesday, and I'll sit in my favorite chair again, sipping coffee and watching the sunrise. But I won't be waiting passively for whatever the day might bring. I'll be ready for it. Because Rebecca taught me something else that day when she slapped me and demanded my house keys. She taught me that I'm not just a survivor. I'm a fighter. The phone rang at 6:30 a.m. on a cold Wednesday morning in March, exactly 2 years and 6 months after that first confrontation. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something about the early hour and the persistent ringing made me answer. Mrs. Chen. The voice was professional but urgent. This is Detective Martinez with the State Corrections Department. I'm calling to inform you that Rebecca Chen was released from prison yesterday. My blood ran cold. Released? But she wasn't supposed to be eligible for parole for another 8 months. Good behavior and overcrowding, the detective explained. I know this is concerning given the threats she made, but we wanted you to be aware. Her parole conditions prohibit her from contacting you or coming within 500 yards of your property. After I hung up, I sat in Harold's chair, not my chair anymore, but his, and tried to process this information. Rebecca was free. After everything she'd done, after all the lives she'd destroyed, she was walking around somewhere, probably already planning her next move. Marcus arrived within the hour, his face grim with worry. Mom, maybe it's time to consider other options, he said gently. Janet has that guest house behind her place. You'd be safe there, and we could keep an eye on you. No. The word came out more forcefully than I'd intended. I won't be driven from my home by that woman. Not now, not ever. But Mom, Marcus, listen to me. I took his hands in mine, feeling how rough they'd become from his work at the Children's Foundation. If I run now, if I let fear dictate my choices, then Rebecca wins. She takes this house from me, just as surely as if I'd handed her the keys that day. Over the next few weeks, we took precautions. New security cameras with motion detection, a panic button system connected directly to the police, and regular check-ins with Detective Martinez. Margaret moved temporarily into my guest room, claiming she needed a change of scenery, but really wanting to keep me company. For 2 months, nothing happened. Rebecca seemed to have vanished, and I began to wonder if maybe prison had actually changed her. Maybe she'd learned her lesson and moved on to rebuild her life, somewhere far away from us. I should have known better. If you're on the edge of your seat, wondering what Rebecca does next, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. This story is about to take another shocking turn. The first sign was subtle, so subtle I almost missed it. I was in my garden, tending to the roses Harold had planted for our anniversary, when I noticed that someone had been walking through the flower bed. The footprints were small, definitely made by a woman's shoe, and they led right up to my kitchen window. I called Marcus immediately, and he called Detective Martinez. But by the time they arrived, the footprints had been washed away by a sudden spring shower. Without evidence, there was nothing they could do. Maybe it was just a lost delivery person, Marcus suggested, but I could see the worry in his eyes. 2 days later, I found a note tucked under my car's windshield wiper. "Enjoying your borrowed time, Eleanor." The handwriting was disguised, printed in block letters, but something about the phrasing felt familiar. Rebecca had always been dramatic, always had a flair for the theatrical. This time, Detective Martinez took it seriously. The note was analyzed. For fingerprints, none found, and patrols in my neighborhood were increased. But I knew it wasn't enough. Rebecca was playing a game now, and she was enjoying it. The psychological warfare escalated quickly. Dead flowers appeared on my porch. My mailbox was vandalized. Strange calls in the middle of the night where no one spoke, but I could hear someone breathing on the other end. "She's trying to wear you down," Margaret observed one evening as we watched the news together. "Make you so anxious and exhausted that you'll make a mistake." Margaret was right, but knowing Rebecca's strategy didn't make it easier to deal with. I found myself jumping at every unexpected sound, checking the locks 3 times before bed, and barely sleeping through the night. Marcus wanted me to get a restraining order, but without proof that Rebecca was behind the harassment, it would be nearly impossible. She was too clever to get caught in the act, too experienced at avoiding detection. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. I called the private investigator I'd used before, a tough woman named Carmen Rodriguez, who specialized in cases involving stalking and harassment. If Rebecca was watching me, then it was time to watch her back. Carmen's investigation revealed that Rebecca was living in a motel about 15 miles from my house, working part-time at a convenience store, and spending most of her free time driving past my neighborhood. She hadn't violated the legal terms of her restraining order. She stayed exactly 501 yards away from my property, but she was definitely stalking me. "She's planning something," Carmen told me during one of our weekly meetings. "This level of surveillance, this pattern of psychological intimidation, it's building towards something bigger." Comment scary if this story is giving you chills. Eleanor's about to face her biggest challenge yet. Carmen was right. 3 weeks later, Rebecca made her move. I was at the grocery store, doing my weekly shopping with the list Margaret had helped me write, when I felt someone watching me. I turned around, expecting to see Rebecca lurking behind the cereal aisle, but instead, I saw a young man I didn't recognize. He was tall, thin, with the kind of hollow look that comes from drug addiction or desperation. He followed me through the store, always staying just far enough away to maintain plausible deniabilities. When I got in line to check out, he got in line behind me. When I loaded my groceries into my car, he was loading his into a beat-up sedan, parked 3 spaces away. I called Marcus from the car, keeping my voice low. "I think Rebecca has hired someone to follow me." "Are you sure?" I described the young man, and Marcus's sharp intake of breath told me he recognized the description. "That's Danny Morrison, Rebecca's nephew." "Mom, get out of there now. Drive straight to the police station." But as I started my car, Danny's sedan pulled directly behind me, blocking me in. Through my rearview mirror, I could see him talking on his phone, his face animated and excited. He was reporting back to Rebecca. I managed to maneuver around him and drive quickly to the police station, where Detective Martinez was waiting for me. But by the time officers arrived at the grocery store, both Danny and his car were gone. "We need to end this," Marcus said that evening, pacing back and forth in my living room, off like a caged animal. "This has gone too far." "How?" I asked. "She's not technically breaking any laws. She's staying away from the house. She's not making direct contact, and we can't prove she's behind any of the harassment. Then we make her break the law." Marcus said grimly. "What do you mean?" "We set a trap. The plan was Marcus's idea, but I had to admit it was clever. We would create a situation that would tempt Rebecca to reveal herself and hopefully do something that would finally give the police grounds to arrest her. We started by spreading word through carefully selected channels that I was having serious health problems and that Marcus was considering moving me to a care facility. Carmen made sure this information reached Rebecca through her network of contacts. Next, we arranged for me to be seen at the hospital for what appeared to be a serious medical consultation. Carmen followed Rebecca's nephew Danny as he followed me, confirming that Rebecca was indeed keeping close tabs on my activities. Finally, we let it be known that I would be meeting with my lawyer to discuss changes to my will, and that I would be alone in the house for the meeting on a specific date and time. The bait was set. Now we had to wait and see if Rebecca would take it. Hit that subscribe button if you want to find out whether Eleanor's dangerous plan works. The morning of our planned trap, I was more nervous than I'd been since that first confrontation 2.5 years ago. Marcus and Detective Martinez were positioned in an unmarked van down the street with a direct view of my front door. Carmen was in my neighbor's house across the street, also keeping watch. Margaret had been sent to stay with her sister for the day, despite her protest that she wanted to help. I sat in my living room, wearing a small recording device, and waited. At exactly 2 p.m., there was a knock at my front door, but it wasn't Rebecca. It was Danny Morrison, looking even more desperate than he had at the grocery store. "Mrs. Chen?" he called through the door. "I'm here about the lawn service." We hadn't arranged for any lawn service, of course. This was Rebecca's way of getting someone into my house without technically violating her restraining order. "I'm sorry," I called back, "but I didn't request any lawn service. Your son Marcus called us," Danny insisted. "Said you needed the backyard cleaned up before the house goes on the market." The house going on the market. That was a clever touch. Rebecca was using information from our fake story about my health problems to make Danny's presence seem legitimate. "I'll need to call Marcus to confirm," I said, buying time while the police moved into position. "No need," Danny replied, and I heard the sound of metal against metal. He was picking my lock. That was it. The illegal entry we needed to make an arrest. But as the front door swung open, it wasn't Danny who walked through it. It was Rebecca. "Hello, Eleanor," she said calmly, as if she were just stopping by for tea. "Miss me?" She looked different than she had 3 years ago. Prison had aged her, made her thinner and harder, but her eyes still held that same calculating intelligence that had made her so dangerous. "You're not supposed to be here," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Oh, but I'm not here," Rebecca smiled. "Danny is here. I'm just keeping him company." It was a technicality, but probably not one that would hold up in court. Rebecca was clearly violating her restraining order. "What do you want?" I asked. "This same thing I wanted 3 years ago," Rebecca replied. "What's rightfully mine? Nothing in this house is rightfully yours, isn't it?" Rebecca moved deeper into the room, and I noticed she was wearing gloves. "You stole years of my life, Eleanor. You cost me my marriage, my freedom, my reputation. I'd say that makes us even. You cost yourself all of those things," I replied. "I just refuse to be your victim." Rebecca's laugh was harsh and bitter. Victim. Oh, Eleanor, you have no idea what being a victim really means. But you're about to learn. That's when I saw the knife. It wasn't large. Just a simple kitchen knife, the kind any household would have. But in Rebecca's gloved hand, it looked deadly. You're going to sign some papers for me, Rebecca said conversationally. And then you're going to have a terrible accident. Such a shame. An elderly woman, living alone, having a fall down the stairs. The police know you're here, I said desperately. Do they? Rebecca glanced toward the window. I don't see any police cars. And Danny made sure no one followed us here. She was wrong, of course. But I realized that Marcus and Detective Martinez were probably waiting for her to commit a more serious crime before moving in. They needed to catch her in the act of actually threatening me. Not just trespassing. The papers are on Harold's desk, I said, playing for time. Rebecca's eyes lit up with triumph. I knew you'd see reason eventually. As she turned toward the desk, I pressed the panic button Carmen had hidden in my pocket. But I also did something else, something that probably wasn't very smart, but felt necessary in the moment. Rebecca, I said, causing her to turn back toward me. Yes? Before I sign anything, I want you to know something. She raised an eyebrow impatiently. I want you to know that you never scared me. Not really. Not that first day when you slapped me, and not now. Rebecca's face darkened with anger. No? Then why are your hands shaking? Because I'm angry, I said, and realized it was true. I'm angry that you hurt my son. I'm angry that you hurt other innocent people. And I'm angry that you think you can walk into my home and threaten me. Your anger won't help you now. Rebecca snarled, raising the knife. That's when Marcus and Detective Martinez burst through the front door, followed immediately by two other officers. In the chaos that followed, Rebecca dropped the knife and tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. As they handcuffed her, Rebecca turned to look at me one last time. This isn't over, she hissed. Yes, I replied calmly. It is. Share this story. If you believe in never giving up, no matter what life throws at you. Rebecca was sentenced to 12 years in prison for breaking and entering, violation of a restraining order, assault with a deadly weapon, and attempted extortion. Her nephew Danny received a lighter sentence in exchange for testifying against her and revealing the full extent of her plan. It turned out that Rebecca had been planning something much more elaborate than just forcing me to sign papers. She'd researched my medical history, my daily routines, and even my relationships with neighbors and friends. Her plan was to make my death look like a natural accident and then challenge my will in court, claiming that I'd been mentally incompetent when I signed it. The only reason her plan failed was because we'd taken the initiative to trap her instead of waiting passively for her next move. You were braver than I would have been, Carmen told me after the trial concluded. Most people would have run. I couldn't run, I explained. This house, this life, it's all I have left of Harold. I couldn't let her take that away. Marcus understood, and he stopped pressuring me to move somewhere safer. Instead, he helped me make the house truly secure, while still allowing me to live independently. The security upgrades were extensive but unobtrusive. Motion sensors that would alert Marcus and the police if anyone approached the house after dark. Cameras with facial recognition software that would trigger an alarm if Rebecca or any of her known associates came near the property. A safe room in the basement where I could retreat if necessary. But the most important security upgrade was psychological. I was no longer afraid. I'd faced my tormentor twice now and emerged victorious both times. I'd learned that I was stronger, smarter, and more resourceful than I'd ever imagined. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible stories of courage and triumph. 5 years have passed since Rebecca first slapped me and demanded my house keys. She's serving her 12-year sentence in a maximum security facility 3 states away. Danny Morrison got clean in prison and now works at a rehabilitation center, helping other addicts get their lives back on track. Marcus married Janet 3 years ago in a beautiful ceremony held in my backyard under Harold's oak tree. They have a baby now, my first grandchild, a little girl named Eleanor Harold Chen Martinez. Yes, they gave her both mine and Harold's names, which made me cry happy tears for a week. The house is full of life again. Marcus and Janet visit every Sunday with the baby, and Margaret still comes for bridge every Friday. The Riverside Children's Foundation is thriving, and I've become more involved in their work, serving on the board of directors and helping to plan their new facility. My will remains unchanged. The house will still go to the foundation when I'm gone, along with most of my other assets. But I've also set up trust funds for little Eleanor and any other grandchildren who might come along. Marcus and Janet will be comfortable, but not wealthy, which is exactly how Harold and I planned it. Sometimes, late at night when I'm sitting in Harold's chair, watching old movies or reading one of his favorite books, I think about the woman I was 5 years ago. She was lonely, isolated and vulnerable to predators like Rebecca. She was living in the past, surrounded by memories, but not really engaged with the present. That woman is gone now, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and more connected to the world around her. Rebecca didn't just fail to destroy me. She inadvertently helped create a better version of me. I'm not the same passive elderly woman who opened her door to a manipulative daughter-in-law on that Tuesday morning so long ago. I'm a fighter, a survivor, and a protector of others who might find themselves in similar situations. Which brings me to why I'm telling this story. If you're reading this and you recognize elements of your own situation, if you have a family member who's pushing boundaries, pressuring you to make financial decisions, or making you feel unsafe in your own home, please know that you're not alone and you're not powerless. Document everything. Tell someone you trust. Don't let shame or embarrassment prevent you from seeking help. And remember that being elderly doesn't mean being helpless. Most importantly, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is wrong. Don't let anyone convince you that you're being paranoid or overly dramatic. Your safety and your autonomy matter, regardless of your age. Please share this story with anyone who might need to hear it. You never know whose life you might help save. As I finish writing this, the sun is setting behind Harold's oak tree once again. Little Eleanor is asleep in her carrier beside my chair, making the tiny snuffling sounds that babies make when they're dreaming. Marcus and Janet are in the kitchen, cleaning up after Sunday dinner and arguing good-naturedly about whether we should plant tomatoes or peppers in the garden this year. The house feels exactly the way Harold and I always dreamed it would feel, full of love, laughter, and the promise of future generations who will carry on our values and our dreams. Rebecca wanted to steal all of this from me. She wanted to reduce my life to nothing more than a bank balance and a real estate transaction, but love can't be stolen. Family can't be stolen. The knowledge that you've lived a good life, stood up for what's right, and protected the people and causes that matter most, that can't be stolen either. Tomorrow morning, I'll sit in Harold's chair again, sipping my coffee and watching the sunrise, and I'll be grateful for the life I've lived, the battles I've won, and the peace I've finally found. But I'll also be ready for whatever challenges might come, ready to fight if necessary, and ready to protect the people I love. Because that's what you do when someone slaps you and demands your house keys. You fight back, and you win. Thank you for listening, Eleanor's incredible story of courage and determination. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring tales of triumph over adversity. Your support helps us bring these important stories to light and reminds others that they too have the strength to overcome any challenge. Have you or someone you know faced a similar situation? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else find the courage to stand up for themselves. Remember, you're never too old to fight for what's right, and you're never too vulnerable to find your inner strength. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and never let anyone make you feel powerless in your own life.